Boxing Voice.
So those who follow the world of boxing are hearing the most serious rumblings, certainly I think in a long time, of the possibility of a Mayweather-Pacquiao bout. Joining us now from the Boxing Voice and the Boxing Voice radio show, Joe Habeeb, courtesy of the CarQuest Hotline. Hey, Joe, how are you?
How you doing? Good afternoon, or good morning over there.
What do you think? Yeah, it's pretty early morning still. Let's get to what you think the chances are of this fight actually happening.
I think this fight will definitely happen in May. I strongly believe that. And, you know, I've been on the seesaw, the roller coaster ride of playing the blame game, having the pendulum swing back and forth from one side to the other. You know, for a while there, I was criticizing Mayweather for being silent, for not coming out and talking about it, and every time he was asked about the fight, he would get upset. But now he's coming out and talking about it, and I think he really wants this fight. I think he believes now that maybe Pacquiao has slipped just enough where the fight may not be as dangerous as it was 5 years ago. Now there's so much money being put on the table that it's almost impossible for him to, turn it down. I think the networks are putting pressure on him as well. So I just think this fight is going to happen. I really believe it.
Okay, here's what I don't get. Maybe you can clear up how this works. There's been a lot of talk that Pacquiao is willing to take a smaller amount of money, and I can get, whereas the undefeated champion, Mayweather, is entitled to a larger share of the purse. But to me, if I'm Pacquiao, I'm not taking a ridiculous purse. I'm not taking 15 or 20% of what Mayweather gets. Why does Mayweather get to call the tune on this? I mean, I would have thought this would be booked by an organization. Does Mayweather book these things himself? Well, how does this work that Mayweather gets to call the shots on how much Pacquiao makes?
Well, he really doesn't have, a say, a direct per se. I mean, he has an influence, but Mayweather is definitely one of the most powerful people in the sport, and his situation is really unlike anyone else that I've ever seen in the sport. I mean, where else have you ever seen, someone say, I'm going to fight on 2 specific dates, and a hotel specifically every year reserves those 2 dates for this one man, and they don't schedule any events on those 2 dates that this man wants to fight. So, I mean, this is nothing new in boxing. I was getting into a debate with someone this morning about people who made ridiculous demands, and Sugar Ray Leonard is my favorite boxer of all time. I love the man. But there was one thing that he did when he fought for 2 titles on the same night. He fought for a 168-pound title and a 175-pound title, against Donnie Lalonde. And he made Donnie Lalonde come down to 168 pounds. Basically, he looked dead in the ring, coming in at 168 pounds. So this is nothing new to me in boxing. I mean, Sugar Ray Robinson, if you read about him, he threatened to pull out of a fight the day of the fight, because he didn't like the size of the ring. So people say that Mayweather's making ridiculous demands, but most people in his position have done this in the sport of boxing. Now, should Pacquiao get a fair share? Absolutely. But if you do look at the numbers, Mayweather does have the leverage here. Mayweather is the bigger draw by far. It used to be close, but it's not really that close anymore. I mean, Mayweather is making a lot more money than Pacquiao. We don't really know how much Pacquiao's making. I mean, when the purses have been reported to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, I think the biggest purse on record was $13 million. Mayweather has had guarantees. When he fought Canelo Alvarez, his guarantee was $41 million. So just do the math right there. Now, does Pacquiao deserve 10%, 15%? Probably not, but I could see a 65-35, 70-30 split. I mean, I think that's reasonable given the recent numbers, the recent history of these 2 fighters' events. Absolutely.
See, and I don't know how much they weigh this, but the popularity of Pacquiao, certainly in Asia, of course, the Philippines, but some other places in the world may be greater than it is here in terms of the relation between Mayweather and Pacquiao. I mean, is that not legit?
That's an outstanding, accurate statement. And to support what you just said, Mayweather's never met President Obama. Manny Pacquiao has. Mayweather never has and probably never will be on the cover of Time magazine. Manny Pacquiao has. Mayweather will probably never hold, office in the United States, become a congressman or hold any type of political office. Pacquiao has. So in that regard, yeah, I mean, Pacquiao is the more popular guy worldwide, and he's very likable. I mean, let's face it, Mayweather's not the nicest guy in the world. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I could never see myself hanging out with a guy like Mayweather, being close friends with a guy like Mayweather. But that's beside the point. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business. And if we all take the emotion out of this, take the good guy, bad guy out of this, then and we just look at it from a logical business standpoint, Mayweather has the leverage here. He has the overwhelming amount of leverage here. And for him to not use it would be ridiculous. I mean, I would use it if I had it. I know possibly most of you guys out there would use it. So, I mean, we can criticize this guy all we want. But, the recent rumblings of Bob Arum coming out and saying, oh, well, he shouldn't be fighting on May 2nd. Canelo Alvarez should be fighting on May 2nd. All of a sudden, they want to take these dates away from him that he's had for 5 years. Now, I think, they're trying to put pressure on Mayweather to fight Pacquiao. I used to think that maybe Bob Arum was butting in, why does he care? But I think now everyone really wants this fight. I think people know in the boxing world that we need this fight. We need this fight because it's going to elevate our sport. It's going to bring a lot of attention to our sport. And in the long run, it's going to be a positive mark for boxing. It's going to put boxing on the forefront for the first time in a long time. So I think everybody wants this fight. So I think that they're threatening to have Canelo Cotto on that date if Mayweather does not fight Pacquiao. So I used to think that Arum was probably trying to be a deterrent in making this fight, but I actually think that Arum and De La Hoya, by both saying they want Alvarez and Cotto to fight on this date, it's more of a tactic, a strong-arm tactic to kind of push along this Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. So I just think that there's a lot of things working behind the scenes. You have the CBS executives really working on pushing this fight. You have the two networks talking. They're willing to work together. A lot of things that weren't possible or weren't going to happen 5 to 6 years ago, they're starting to fall into place now. A lot of these loose ends are being tied up. Now, the only thing now is just basically putting the signatures on the paper, which I think is going to probably be announced either maybe second or third week in January. I think you'll get an announcement that this fight is going to happen in May. I just don't see where they can go.
Is this going to be, and I guess, Joe, this is a big question, is this going to be on a network? I mean, you keep talking to networks like CBS. Is this going to be a network broadcast, do you think?
No, I think it will be a Showtime pay-per-view, but I could see like maybe HBO having like rights to show the rebroadcast. I could see CBS, which is affiliated with Showtime, I could see them doing a lot of advertisement on regular TV for this. So when I say networks, I'm talking about everyone involved here, because Pacquiao's an HBO fighter, Mayweather's a Showtime fighter, CBS is affiliated with Showtime, so they're going to really try to get behind the promotion of this as well. And the execs over there have invested a lot of money in this contract with Mayweather. So I think that everyone in terms of behind the scenes, with the exception of maybe Al Heyman, Floyd Mayweather's manager, and maybe Bob Arum, everyone behind the scenes is kind of talking, communicating, and working on this. And I think the last two people that really need to have a conversation is Bob Arum and Al Heyman. And hopefully that could happen. I know Mayweather doesn't like Bob Arum, but he does have a good relationship with Todd DeBuff, who is the second in command over there at Top Rank. And Todd, he's handled a lot of fights for Bob when Bob hasn't been involved in everything, when Bob is tied up doing something else. So it could be possible that, Bob just turns the reins over to Todd DeBuff, and Todd DeBuff can handle, ironing out the final details to get this fight done. Mayweather doesn't have to deal with Bob Arum, and Bob Arum doesn't have to be directly involved with this fight to be part of it. His company can still be part of it, and Todd DeBuff can handle the negotiations. So, I mean, there's a lot of positive things going on here, in my opinion, that I think is going to push this fight along.
Well, I think it's fair to say that this is going to be the biggest payday either fighter has ever made. I mean, despite the fact that Mayweather does make a fortune as it is, and Manny Pacquiao doesn't seem to be He's not having to clip coupons either.
No.
So, but yet they'll be making more money than either of them ever has for any fight they've ever fought in, ostensibly. Is that right? Is that not correct?
That is by far and away very accurate. Yes. I mean,
see, I've heard ridiculous numbers of what this fight could bring in.
Well,
what do you think the pool just for the fighters, and forget all of the other stuff that every other dog in town, cat in town, will have a piece of, but in terms of the pool that the fighters will share, I mean, what are we talking? 100 million? I mean, what are we talking about? What they might share?
Well, this is the funny thing about this fight. Before I answer that question, I want to just use a little history. When this fight was first announced back in, I believe, 2010, both fighters were offered a guarantee of $25 million apiece. Mm-hmm. Now, people are saying, "Oh, this fight isn't as big as it was 5 years ago." That's the most ludicrous statement I've ever heard in my life. Because I'm going to answer your question right now. I've heard, and this is what I've heard, and I don't know how accurate this is. I've heard that Mayweather was offered as much as $110 million guarantee up front. That's without the pay-per-view upside, and Pacquiao has been offered $80 million up front. And this is without the pay-per-view. Yeah. So imagine if you add the pay-per-view in there, Mayweather could earn 180 million. Pacquiao maybe 120. I mean, this is an obscene amount of money here. And then I've heard that Mayweather had requested a rematch clause if the fight was to happen. So imagine if they had a rematch. Imagine having two fights. Imagine if the first fight was competitive and then they have the second fight. Imagine how much money two fights could generate. I mean, Mayweather fought Maidana twice. Imagine fighting Pacquiao twice. How much money could he generate? I mean, this could be like unprecedented. I don't see anything ever coming close to this. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, but I just can't see anything ever coming close to this. It's just amazing.
So let's get to this because it's fun to talk about all these historical number analyses. But let's get to the fight itself. I don't know if you buy some of this. Some of the Pacquiao camp kind of claims that his political career has derailed some of his boxing ambition and that he hasn't been necessarily in the last few years, not because of declining skills, but because of distraction, other priorities, maybe not the boxer he was earlier. I have to if that is at all true, I'd have to think that Mayweather should be prepared for the absolute best that Pacquiao could muster, because this has had to be in the back of his mind for the last 12 years. I mean, it's got to be kind of a bit of a festering wound at this point. So in terms of getting Pacquiao's absolute best effort, I think Mayweather can't better be prepared for that, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at Mayweather's history. I mean, he's always come to every fight in shape, and I think both of these guys have played this fight over in their head about 1 million times for the last 5 years. Whether or not they're going to admit it, whether or not they say, hey, we don't watch each other's fights, I think these guys have been studying each other for a long time. I think they know that it's inevitable that they're going to meet. And you could say what you want about Pacquiao. I've been the biggest Pacquiao critic for the last 5 years. I've analyzed his style. I've pointed out his flaws. But at the end of the day, it's like when you look at any other athlete. When you look at Bob Cousy, who used to throw free throws underhanded, but he was over 90% free throw shooter. So it's not necessarily how you look when you're doing something. It's your successfulness. It's you know how you are able to win. And if you're winning, then it really doesn't matter that, hey, you know what, you're off balance when you throw your left hand. It doesn't really matter that your defense isn't the greatest. It doesn't really matter that you're wild. If you're able to beat your opponent, then you're beating your opponent. I mean, you can say what you want about Manny Pacquiao. Arguably, he has the fastest feet in boxing. Arguably, he may have the fastest hands in boxing. I mean, whether or not he does everything in a textbook fashion, whether or not he's as seasoned and skillful as Mayweather, all those things don't matter in boxing sometimes. I mean, we've seen guys like Sugar Ray Robinson lose to guys like Jake LaMotta. I mean, we've seen Tyson lose to Buster Douglas. Anything can happen in this sport. So I've looked at Manny Pacquiao, but at the end of the day, there's two things I can't take away from him. He's a phenomenal athlete, and he is extremely fast. So those two things are going to present some problems for Mayweather. I used to think that this was a one-sided fight, but the way Pacquiao has been fighting recently, I know he hasn't been fighting the best guys. I mean, he fought Timothy Bradley 2 fights ago, who I hold in high regard. But there's some things that I like that Pacquiao's doing now. You know, Bob Arum made a statement before that Pacquiao, after he knocked out Hatton with one punch, he started to think he was a knockout artist. Now I think Pacquiao realizes that he's not a knockout artist. Now he's just trying to win. Now he's just throwing his combinations, landing his shots, just trying to pile up the points, trying to score, as opposed to trying to knock everyone out. Like, he got in trouble for trying to knock out Marquez, and what happened? He ended up getting knocked out himself. So I think as he's gotten older, I think he realizes that, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel is starting to dim. There's not much time left. So I have to fight more intelligently moving forward. I have to realize that maybe I am not this power puncher that I once thought I was. Especially at welterweight, he hasn't knocked anyone out in 5 years. Mayweather hasn't knocked anyone out in a while. So both these guys realize that they're getting older. They realize that they have limitations. I mean, Mayweather may be slipping a bit, Pacquiao may be slipping a bit, but at the end of the day, these guys have retained enough of their skill where they're still two top-level fighters in the game, two of the best fighters in the game. That's unquestionable. So,
let me ask you a question real quick, because I'm just thinking ahead to what would make a second fight even bigger than the first. And it almost seems to me that the more competitive, and maybe even a Pacquiao win, might make the rematch. I'm trying to think what would contribute to making the rematch even bigger. And I think it would have to be uber competitive, and maybe even a Pacquiao win to absolutely maximize a second fight. Where would you be on that?
Well, as you said, I think the fight would have to be competitive, and I am starting to think now that the fight is a lot more competitive now than it would have been 5 years ago, because I really like the way Pacquiao's fighting now. I think he's really starting to realize that I have to pace myself in there. I have to be smart. I cannot be reckless. I can't go for the home run every time out. I just gotta win. I just gotta win. And he has the hand speed and the athleticism to be able to do that. I mean, he has a great pair of legs. I mean, he still has retained his legs over these years. Mayweather really hasn't been using his legs a lot. Every now and then he does, but I just think that's what makes this fight so intriguing, that you have a guy who brings a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, a guy who's a southpaw. This will be the fastest guy Mayweather has ever fought. It'll be the fastest guy Mayweather has ever fought. It'll be this will be the toughest test for Mayweather, in my opinion. I used to think that this would be an easy fight for Mayweather. Now I like the way Pacquiao has approached boxing now. I like this new Pacquiao. I really do.
Is this partly the influence of Freddie Roach, do you think? I mean, has this been a collaboration in terms of how Pacquiao's thinking, or is Pacquiao, in your mind, come to this more or less on his own?
I think Pacquiao's come to this more or less on his own, and taking nothing away from Freddie Roach. I've been very critical of Roach, because Roach is the type of guy where he takes guys and he tells them, hey, go for the knockout. He likes knockouts. I think he trains people to knock out their opponents. And I think now Roach is realizing, and even Pacquiao is realizing, that, hey, you know what? We're not knocking guys out anymore. We need to just win. We need to settle down, and we need to just win. And that's I mean, the reckless Pacquiao that fought Marquez the fourth time, that's a gift for Mayweather. But this Mayweather that fought, this Pacquiao that fought Bradley, and this Pacquiao that fought Algieri, this is a tough test for Mayweather.
I mean, I can really get when you're talking about the mega numbers and the popularity of this fight, because I'm not someone disposed toward buying pay-per-view boxing. I mean, I remember going to a theater. This will show you how old I am. But I remember going to a theater. I grew up on Long Island. I went to a theater in Valley Stream, and the first fight I ever paid to watch was in a theater. It was the No Mas. It was the Ren Letter No Mas.
Wow.
And yeah, that's going back some. But the concept, I think it was about $30 then, which, you know, was almost like real money. And it seemed like a lot at the time. I was very young, so it seemed like a lot to pay to go watch a fight in a movie theater. But now on pay-per-view, this is one I wouldn't miss. And I would consider myself, I put myself in the casual boxing fan category. But if I'm going to buy this on pay-per-view, that would tell you that there's going to be, I think the interest is properly promoted, which means full on, full out. I just think this is going to set record for viewership worldwide.
Absolutely. And it's ironic that you say that, because I've talked to people, you know, at my job, at my gym, people who don't really watch boxing as religiously as I do. They're casual fans like yourself. And I've heard people say, hey, you know what? I'd pay up to $100 to watch this fight.
Me too, and I'm right on board with that.
Yeah. So imagine the amount of money this could make. They could charge $100 and up for this fight, and people would buy it. And imagine if it sold $3 million. And imagine $3 million, okay, at $100 a pop. And then you take the live gate, and then you take all of these factors in. I mean, this fight is just, it's a can't miss. This fight has to happen. It has to happen. For people to say, hey, I don't care about it, I don't believe that, because we're still talking about this fight 5 years later. Oh, this fight's not popular anymore. This fight's lost its luster. This fight is bigger now than it's ever been. I told you the numbers from when it was first proposed as to what the numbers are now. That's a far cry, isn't it? So apparently someone wants this fight to happen. A lot of people want this fight to happen.
And Joe, I know that you're among them. So thanks so much for your time today. Enjoyed it. Joe, Joe, the Boxing Voice, check it out, the Boxing Voice radio show.
Thanks, Joe. That was great.
Thanks, Joe. Have a great holiday.
All right, thank you.
And it's 24 minutes past. If you have questions or comments.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, no problem.
Have a great day, man.
Yep.
The Boxing Voice.